The decision that changed everything. Rachel. Thompson gripped the boarding pass with trembling fingers as she stood in line at Chicago O'Hare International Airport. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead while travelers rushed past her, each absorbed in their own urgent journeys. She shifted Oliver's weight on her hip, feeling the dampness of his drool seeping through her faded blue sweater. At 28 years old, Rachel was about to make the biggest gamble of her life, and the weight of that decision pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden. Oliver, her 9-month-old son, had been fussing since they left their tiny apartment that morning. His chubby cheeks were flushed, and his brown eyes, so much like Rachel's own, were rimmed with red from crying. She bounced him gently, whispering soothing words that seemed to evaporate in the chaos of the bustling terminal. Behind them, an older woman tutted disapprovingly at the noise, and Rachel felt her cheeks burn with shame. A stranger's kindness begins the job offer in Boston had arrived like a lifeline when Rachel was drowning in overdue bills and sleepless nights. A family named the Mitchells had contacted her through an online childcare agency, promising decent pay and housing assistance. It wasn't much, but it was more than the retail job in Chicago that barely covered diapers and formula. Oliver's father, Derek, had vanished 6 months ago, leaving nothing but broken promises and an empty bank account. Rachel's mother had begged her not to go, warning her about the dangers of trusting strangers in unfamiliar cities. But what choice did she have? Stay in Chicago and watch her son grow up in poverty, or take a chance on something better? As she finally boarded the plane, Rachel's anxiety spiked. She had never flown before. The narrow aisle seemed to close in around her as she searched for seat 18B. Juggling Oliver, a diaper bag, and a small backpack containing everything they owned that mattered. When she found her row, a man was already seated by the window. Benjamin Hayes looked up from his phone and immediately stood to let her pass. He was tall, with sandy brown hair that showed hints of gray at the temples, and striking green eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He wore a casual navy sweater and jeans, nothing that screamed wealth or status. "The flight of compassion here. Let me help you with that," Benjamin offered, reaching for her diaper bag before she could protest. His accent was distinctly New England, refined but not pretentious. "Thank you so much," Rachel breathed, grateful for any assistance as she maneuvered into the middle seat with Oliver, squirming in her arms. The baby had other plans for the journey. As soon as the plane began taxiing, Oliver's fussing escalated into full-blown wailing. Rachel tried everything she could think of: a bottle, his favorite stuffed giraffe, gentle rocking, desperate shushing. Nothing worked. The passengers around them shifted uncomfortably, and Rachel caught several pointed stares. "I'm so sorry," she whispered to Benjamin, tears of frustration threatening to spill. "He's usually not like this. I think he can feel how nervous I am." Benjamin's expression remained patient and kind. "Please don't apologize. Babies cry. It's what they do. You're doing great." His words were simple, but the genuine compassion in his voice cracked something open in Rachel's chest. She couldn't remember the last time someone had offered her encouragement instead of judgment. Anne. Unexpected rest. 2 hours into the flight, Oliver finally exhausted himself. His cries faded to whimpers, then to the soft, even breathing of sleep. Rachel felt her own eyelids growing heavy. She had been awake most of the night, triple-checking their documents, packing and repacking their meager belongings. Second-guessing every decision that had led to this moment, the hum of the plane's engines created a cocoon of white noise. Rachel's head grew heavier, nodding forward, then jerking back up as she fought to stay awake. She didn't want to disturb the kind stranger beside her any more than she already had. But exhaustion is a powerful force. Without realizing it, Rachel's head drifted sideways, coming to rest on something solid and warm. Benjamin felt the weight settle against his shoulder and froze. He glanced down to see Rachel's dark curls tickling his neck. Her face finally relaxed in sleep, with Oliver cradled securely in her arms. For a moment, Benjamin considered gently waking her, but something stopped him. He could see the deep circles under her eyes, the worn fabric of her clothes, the way her hands, even in sleep, maintained a protective grip on her child. This woman was carrying a heavy burden, and if he could give her a few hours of peace, it cost him nothing. The weight of kindness. Benjamin adjusted his position slightly, angling his shoulder to provide better support for Rachel's head. His arm began to tingle with numbness after the first hour, but he didn't move. He simply sat there, watching the clouds drift past the window, occasionally glancing down at the sleeping mother and child who had somehow become his responsibility. The flight attendants noticed. 1. A woman named Patricia, who had been working this route for 15 years, smiled warmly at the scene and offered Benjamin a pillow. He shook his head, mouthing she's sleeping and pointing to Rachel. Patricia nodded with understanding and moved on. Other passengers who had been annoyed by Oliver's crying earlier now looked at the trio with softened expressions. There was something profoundly human about the tableau. Stranger sacrificing his comforts so an exhausted mother could rest. Benjamin found himself wondering about Rachel's story. Where was she going? Why was she traveling alone with an infant? Where was the baby's father? His business instincts, honed by years of evaluating investments and reading people, told him this was a woman in transition, possibly running from something or toward something better. The awakening 3.5 hours later. As the captain announced their descent into Boston, Rachel stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a disoriented moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then reality crashed back. The plane, the job, the uncertain future waiting in an unfamiliar city. She became aware of warmth against her cheek and the subtle rise and fall of breathing that wasn't her own. Horror flooded through her as she jerked upright, realizing she had been sleeping on the stranger's shoulder. "Oh my God," Rachel gasped, her face flushing crimson. "I am so sorry. I can't believe I did that. You must think I'm completely inappropriate." Benjamin stretched his stiff shoulder and smiled reassuringly. "Really, it's fine. You needed rest, and you got it. That's what matters." "But your shoulder must be killing you," Rachel protested, mortified. "You should have woken me up." "You looked peaceful," Benjamin said simply. "And your little one seemed content." "I didn't mind." Oliver, sensing the shift in atmosphere, blinked awake and immediately focused on Benjamin, instead of the cranky fussing he had exhibited earlier. The baby broke into a gummy smile and reached out toward the man who had protected his mother's sleep. Knew connections well. "He certainly likes you," Rachel observed, surprised. "Usually, he's shy with strangers." "I have that effect on people under 1 year old, Benjamin joked, gently touching Oliver's outstretched hand. "After that, my charm seems to wear off." Rachel laughed, a genuine sound that surprised even herself. When was the last time she had laughed? "I'm Rachel, by the way. Rachel Thompson. And this little troublemaker is Oliver." "Benjamin Hayes," he replied, shaking her hand formally. "It's a pleasure to meet you both, even under unusual circumstances." As the plane touched down and passengers began gathering their belongings, Benjamin helped Rachel organize her bags. "Is someone meeting you at the airport?" he asked casually. Rachel's smile faltered. "Not exactly. I'm supposed to take a cab to a hotel. I'm starting a new job here as a nanny, and my employer said they'd arrange accommodation." Psst. Something in her voice, a thread of uncertainty, made Benjamin pause. "Do you have the hotel confirmation?" Rachel fumbled in her bag and pulled out a crumpled paper with an address written in her own handwriting. "The family just gave me the name. The Mitchell family. They're supposed to have everything set up." Benjamin's instincts, sharpened by years of business dealings, sent up a warning flag. "Rachel, I don't want to overstep, but do you have a backup plan if things aren't as arranged?" The question hung in the air as they moved through the jet bridge and into the Boston airport. Rachel's confidence wavered visibly. She hadn't thought about a backup plan. She couldn't afford a backup plan. "I guess I'll figure it out," she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. Benjamin made a decision. "Look, I know Boston well. Would you let me help you get to where you're going? Just to make sure everything is in order?" Rachel studied his face, searching for hidden motives. But all she saw was genuine concern. "Why would you do that?" "You don't even know me. Because sometimes people need help," Benjamin said quietly. "And because I'd like to know that you and Oliver are safe." After a moment's hesitation, Rachel nodded. What did she have to lose? She was already trusting her entire future to strangers. At least this stranger had already proven his kindness. Neither of them could have known that this simple agreement would be the beginning of something that would transform both their lives forever. Shattered expectations, the cab ride through Boston's winding streets should have filled Rachel with wonder. The historic brick buildings, the narrow cobblestone lanes, the glimpse of the Charles River sparkling in the afternoon sun, it was all so different from Chicago's sprawling grid. But anxiety gnawed at her stomach as they approached the address she had been given. The hotel turned out to be a rundown motor lodge on the outskirts of the city, its faded sign missing several letters. Benjamin's jaw tightened as the cab pulled up to the entrance. This was not the kind of establishment where a young mother with an infant should be staying alone. "Wait here, Benjamin," instructed gently. And before Rachel could protest, he had stepped out and entered the dingy lobby. Rachel sat in the back seat, bouncing Oliver on her knee and trying to ignore the sinking feeling in her chest. Through the grimy window, she could see Benjamin talking to the clerk behind the counter. His expression grew increasingly serious. After 10 minutes, he returned with a look that confirmed her worst fears. "There's no reservation under your name," Benjamin said carefully, sliding back into the cab. The clerk checked 3 times. "I also asked about the Mitchell family, and he's never heard of them." The words hit Rachel like a physical blow. Her vision swam, and she felt Oliver's weight in her arms as if he suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. "That can't be right. Mrs. Mitchell specifically told me she would handle everything. She sent me the agency verification and everything." "Do you have her phone number?" Benjamin asked gently. With shaking hands, Rachel pulled out her phone and dialed the number she had saved under Mrs. Mitchell's new job. It rang twice before connecting to an automated message. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." The color drained from Rachel's face. No. This can't be happening. Oliver, sensing his mother's distress, began to whimper. A stranger's solution. Benjamin watched Rachel struggle to maintain her composure and made a decision. "Rachel, listen to me. You're not going to stay here, and you're not going to panic. I know a place that's safe, clean, and affordable. The owner is a friend of mine. Can't afford much," Rachel whispered, her voice breaking. "I used almost everything I had for the plane tickets. I thought the job would cover housing." "Don't worry about that right now," Benjamin said firmly. "First, let's get you and Oliver somewhere comfortable. Then we'll figure out next steps." 20 minutes later, they pulled up to the Riverside Inn, a modest but well-maintained bed and breakfast in Cambridge. The 3-story building had cheerful yellow shutters and flower boxes overflowing with petunias. Benjamin paid the cab driver and helped Rachel with her bags. Inside, a woman in her 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes, greeted them. "Benjamin Hayes. I haven't seen you in months. How's the foundation work going?" "Busy as always, Mrs. Patterson," Benjamin replied warmly. "I need a favor. This is Rachel Thompson and her son Oliver. They've just arrived from Chicago and run into some accommodation issues. Do you have a room available?" Mrs. Patterson took one look at Rachel's exhausted face and Oliver's tear-stained cheeks and immediately softened. "Of course, dear. Room 7 just opened up this morning. It has a lovely view of the river." Rachel tried to speak, to explain she couldn't afford much, but Mrs. Patterson waved her off. "Any friend of Benjamin's is family here. We'll work out the details later. Right now, you look like you need rest and a good meal." Unexpected kindness, the room was simple but spotlessly clean. With a comfortable queen bed, a small sitting area, and large windows that let in golden afternoon light. Mrs. Patterson had even provided a portable crib for Oliver, along with fresh linens and towels. "I don't understand," Rachel said once they were alone in the room. "Why are you doing all this for me? We're complete strangers." Benjamin set down her bags and turned to face her. "Because I've been fortunate in life, and I believe that fortune means nothing if we don't help others when we can. You're in a difficult situation through no fault of your own. Let me help." "But I have nothing to offer you in return," Rachel protested, feeling tears threaten again. "I'm not asking for anything in return," Benjamin said softly. "Just let yourself accept help when it's offered freely. Focus on taking care of Oliver and figuring out your next steps. Oliver had fallen asleep in Rachel's arms, exhausted from the emotional day. She laid him gently in the crib, then turned back to Benjamin. I need to find a job. Fast. And I need to report this Mitchell family to someone. They can't be allowed to do this to other people. I agree completely. Benjamin nodded. And I think I can help with both. Tomorrow morning, if you're willing, I'd like to introduce you to someone who runs a legitimate child care placement agency here in Boston. Her name is Margaret Chen, and she's helped dozens of families find trustworthy caregivers. A network of support over the next few days, Benjamin became Rachel's unexpected guide to her new city. He introduced her to Margaret Chen, a brisk, efficient woman who immediately saw Rachel's potential. Within 48 hours, Margaret had arranged 3 interviews for Rachel with families seeking childcare help. The first interview was with the Anderson family, a couple with 2 energetic boys aged 4 and 6. Dr. James Anderson was a surgeon at Massachusetts General Hospital, and his wife Claire taught music at a local elementary school. Their previous nanny had moved back to Ireland, and they desperately needed someone reliable and warm. Rachel arrived at their brownstone in Beacon Hill with Oliver in a borrowed stroller. Her resume printed on paper she had purchased at a corner store. She was terrified, but Benjamin's encouraging text that morning, "You've got this. Just be yourself," had given her courage. The interview lasted 2 hours. Claire Anderson was immediately taken with how Rachel handled Oliver while simultaneously engaging with her 2 boys, reading them a story and mediating a dispute over toy trucks with patience and humor. "You're a natural," Claire observed. "Have you worked with children professionally before?" "I have an early childhood education certificate from community college," Rachel explained. "And obviously, I have hands-on experience with Oliver. But honestly, Mrs. Anderson, I love children. I love their curiosity, their honesty, their capacity for joy. Being around them makes me a better person." Claire and James exchanged glances. "When can you start?" James asked. "Building a foundation, the job with the Andersons paid $15 an hour for 30 hours a week, with the possibility of occasional evening babysitting for extra income. It wasn't a fortune, but it was steady, legitimate, and the family treated her with respect." Benjamin helped Rachel navigate Boston's public transportation system, teaching her the subway routes and bus schedules. He took her to a second-hand store where she found professional clothes at affordable prices. He connected her with a pediatrician who offered sliding-scale fees for Oliver's checkups, but he never made her feel like a charity case. Every piece of help came with respect for her dignity and autonomy. When he offered to loan her money for a security deposit on an apartment, he presented it as a business transaction with a simple written agreement and flexible repayment terms. "I'm keeping track of everything," Rachel insisted, maintaining a detailed notebook of every dollar Benjamin spent on her behalf. "I will pay you back every cent." "I know you will," Benjamin said simply. "But there's no rush. Focus on building stability for Oliver first." They fell into a routine over the following weeks. Benjamin would text her in the mornings to check how Oliver had slept. He would meet her for coffee on Saturday mornings at a small cafe near her temporary lodging at Mrs. Patterson's. He helped her apartment hunt, viewing 8 different places before they found a small 1-bedroom in a safe neighborhood with reasonable rent. Growing connections. What struck Rachel most was how naturally Benjamin interacted with Oliver. The baby, who had been wary of men after Derek's abandonment, lit up whenever Benjamin appeared. He would reach for him, babbling in that incomprehensible language of infants, trusting Benjamin to understand. "He's never been like this with anyone except my mother," Rachel marveled one Saturday as they walked through Boston Common. Oliver was perched on Benjamin's shoulders, squealing with delight at the elevated view. "Children are good judges of character," Benjamin replied, steadying Oliver's little legs. "They know who's safe." Rachel studied Benjamin's profile as he pointed out ducks in the pond to Oliver. He was handsome in an understated way, with laugh lines that suggested he smiled often, and a gentleness in his movements that belied his height and strength. But more than that, he was present. When he was with them, his phone stayed in his pocket. His attention never wandered. He listened when she talked about her fears and hopes, really listened, asking thoughtful questions, and offering observations that showed he had been paying attention. She found herself thinking about him at odd moments while folding laundry, while feeding Oliver, while riding the subway to work. Not romantic thoughts exactly she wasn't ready for, but something softer. Gratitude, yes, but also a tentative trust that maybe not all good things in life came with hidden costs. The apartment search, finding an affordable apartment in Boston, felt impossible at first. Everything Rachel could afford was either in unsafe neighborhoods or so run down that she worried about Oliver's health. Benjamin accompanied her to every viewing, pointing out problems she might not notice: old wiring, poor insulation, unreliable heating systems. The landlords and rental agents clearly assumed they were a couple. Benjamin never corrected them, sensing that Rachel got better treatment when people thought she had a partner's support. But he also never took advantage of the assumption, maintaining a respectful distance that Rachel appreciated. The apartment they finally found was in Somerville, on the second floor of a well-maintained three-family house. It had hardwood floors that needed refinishing, windows that let in generous light, and a small bedroom perfect for Oliver. The landlord, an elderly Italian man named Mr. Rossi, had raised 5 children in the building and still maintained it with pride. "I like you," Mr. Rossi announced after meeting Rachel and Oliver. "You've got good eyes. Honest eyes. The baby, he's healthy and happy. That tells me you're a good mama." The rent was at the top of Rachel's budget, but Mr. Rossi agreed to let her pay the security deposit in 3 installments. Benjamin offered to co-sign the lease, giving Mr. Rossi additional confidence in Rachel's reliability. A place to call home moving day arrived on a crisp October Saturday. Benjamin showed up at 7 in the morning with a borrowed truck and 2 friends, a carpenter named Luis and a physical therapist named Jordan. They were both around Benjamin's age, friendly and professional, treating Rachel with easy courtesy that never felt condescending. Benjamin called in some favors, Luis explained as they carried in the second-hand furniture Rachel had purchased. Said you were good people who needed a hand. By afternoon, Rachel's tiny apartment had been transformed into a cozy home. Luis had repaired loose floorboards and installed child-proof locks on the kitchen cabinets. Jordan had helped assemble Oliver's crib and a small bookshelf. Benjamin had brought houseplants, throw pillows, and a framed print for the living room wall, Boston Harbor, seen at sunset. "You didn't have to do all this," Rachel said for the 100th time. Overwhelmed by the kindness. "You wanted to," Benjamin replied simply. "Besides, Oliver deserves a nice home, and so do you." That evening, after everyone had left, and Oliver had been fed and put down for the night, Rachel stood at her window looking out at the lights of the city. For the first time since Derek had left, since she had discovered she was alone and pregnant, since the crushing weight of single motherhood had threatened to break her, Rachel felt something unexpected. Hope. Her phone buzzed with a text from Benjamin. "Sleep well. You've earned it. Tomorrow's a new beginning." Rachel smiled and replied, "Thank you for believing in us." She didn't add what she was beginning to feel, that Benjamin Hayes was becoming more than just a helpful stranger. He was becoming necessary, woven into the fabric of her days in a way that both comforted and terrified her. Questions without answers as Rachel drifted off to sleep that night. Questions circled in her mind. Who was Benjamin Hayes really? He had mentioned a foundation when talking to Mrs. Patterson. His friends clearly respected him. He seemed to have endless connections throughout Boston and resources he deployed effortlessly on her behalf. But he never talked about himself in detail. He deflected personal questions with humor or turned conversations back to Rachel's situation. She knew he wasn't married in a ring, and he had mentioned being single. But what did he do for work? Where did his obvious wealth come from? And most importantly, why had he invested so much time and energy into helping a complete stranger and her baby? Rachel wanted to ask, but feared the answers might complicate the simple gratitude she felt. For now, she decided it was enough to accept the help and work hard to build the life she and Oliver deserved. The mysteries of Benjamin Hayes could wait. What she didn't know was that Benjamin was asking himself similar questions. Why had he felt such an immediate connection to this struggling mother and her baby? Why did he check his phone constantly, hoping for a message from Rachel? Why did Saturday mornings with them feel more meaningful than any business meeting or social obligation? Benjamin had built a successful life, but somewhere along the way, it had become empty. Rachel and Oliver had filled a void he hadn't even known existed. The question was, what was he going to do about it? A season of change winter arrived in Boston with typical New England intensity, bringing snow that transformed the city into a postcard in temperatures that made Rachel grateful for the warm apartment Mr. Rossi had helped her afford. 3 months had passed since that fateful airplane ride, and Rachel's life had stabilized in ways she never thought possible. The job with the Andersons had become more than employment. Claire and James treated her like extended family, often inviting her to stay for dinner after work and insisting she'd bring Oliver. Their boys, Tyler and Jackson, adored her son, reading to him and making him laugh with silly faces. Claire had even started paying Rachel extra for occasional weekend babysitting. Money that Rachel carefully saved in her account she had opened at a local credit union, but the most significant change was the role Benjamin had come to play in their daily lives. What had started as charitable help had evolved into genuine friendship, and lately, into something neither of them quite knew how to name: Sunday traditions. Every Sunday morning had become sacred time for the three of them. Benjamin would arrive at Rachel's apartment at 9, usually bearing fresh bagels from her favorite bakery and a newspaper he claimed to want to read but rarely opened. They would have breakfast together with Oliver in his high chair making a delightful mess of mashed bananas and Cheerios. Then they would bundle up and head to Boston Common or the Public Garden, where Benjamin would push Oliver's stroller while Rachel walked beside them, talking about everything and nothing. They discussed books, politics, Rachel's childhood in Chicago. Benjamin's memories of growing up in Vermont before college brought him to Boston. They debated whether pineapple belonged on pizza and which Boston neighborhood had the best Italian food. What they didn't discuss, by unspoken agreement, was the growing awareness that these weren't just friendly outings anymore. The way Benjamin's hand would accidentally brush Rachel's when reaching for Oliver, the way Rachel found herself dressing a bit more carefully on Saturday nights in anticipation of Sunday morning, the way Oliver would cry when Benjamin had to leave, reaching for him with desperate baby hands that broke both adults' hearts. The first step was a Sunday in mid-December when everything shifted. They were in the Public Garden near the frozen pond where the famous swan boat sat dormant until spring. Snow had fallen overnight, coating everything in pristine white. Oliver, now 11 months old and increasingly mobile, was fascinated by the winter wonderland. Benjamin had lifted him out of the stroller and was holding his hands, letting the baby practice the walking motion he had been attempting for weeks. "Come on, buddy," Benjamin encouraged. "You can do it. Just one step." Rachel watched from a nearby bench, her phone ready to capture the moment. She had dozens of photos of Benjamin and Oliver together now. Images she looked at more often than she wanted to admit. Oliver wobbled, his little legs uncertain beneath him. Benjamin slowly released one hand, then the other, staying close enough to catch him if he fell. For a breathtaking moment, Oliver stood alone. Then, with determination that seemed impossible for someone so small, he took a step, then another. 3 tottering steps before tumbling forward into Benjamin's waiting arms. He did it. Rachel shrieked, running over with tears streaming down her face. "Oh my God," Oliver walked. His first steps. Benjamin caught the baby and lifted him high, both of them laughing. "You brilliant little man. I knew you could do it." Oliver giggled, that pure baby laugh that sounds like joy itself. Then, still in Benjamin's arms, he turned to Rachel and said clearly, "Dada." The word that changed everything. Time seemed to stop. Rachel froze, her smile faltering. Benjamin went very still, his eyes widening. He said. Rachel couldn't finish the sentence. "Dada," Oliver repeated, patting Benjamin's cheek with his small hand. Completely unaware of the emotional earthquake he had just triggered, an older couple walking past smiled at the scene. "What a beautiful family," the woman commented to her husband, loud enough for Rachel and Benjamin to hear. Rachel felt her chest tighten. She should correct the woman, explain that they weren't a family, that Benjamin was just a friend helping out. But the words wouldn't come. Because standing there in the snow, watching the man who had rescued them hold her son who had just taken his first steps, Rachel couldn't deny the truth anymore. This felt like family. It felt like home. "Rachel," Benjamin said softly, still holding Oliver. "We should talk." The conversation under the cherry trees, they walked in silence to a more secluded part of the park, where bare cherry trees stood like skeletal sentinels waiting for spring. Benjamin sat on a bench and settled Oliver on his lap. The baby, tired from his walking triumph, rested his head against Benjamin's chest and stuck his thumb in his mouth. Rachel sat beside them, her heart pounding so hard she thought they must be able to hear it. Heart's-laid Oliver had fallen completely asleep now, his small body relaxed in trust against Benjamin's chest. Rachel watched her son's peaceful face and felt tears threatening. "I've been alone for a long time," Benjamin continued. "Not physically alone, I have friends, colleagues, a busy life. But emotionally alone. I built the foundation after my sister died in childbirth. She was young, unprepared, and the father disappeared. She had no support system, no resources. By the time I found out she was pregnant and struggling, it was too late. Complications during delivery, and I lost her and the baby both." "Benjamin," Rachel breathed, reaching for his hand. "I'm so sorry." "Destroyed me," he admitted. "I threw myself into building something that would help other women in her situation. But somewhere in all that work, I forgot how to actually connect with people. I dated occasionally, but never let anyone get close. It was safer that way." He looked directly at Rachel now, his green eyes intense with emotion. "Then I met you. This brave, determined woman who was willing to cross the country alone with a baby, who worked so hard to build a life for her son, who never complained or asked for more than she absolutely needed. And Oliver, this perfect little person, who somehow decided I was worth his trust." "You are worth it," Rachel whispered. "I've fallen in love with you," Benjamin said simply. "Both of you. I love how you sing to Oliver when you think no one's listening. I love how you always carry snacks for other people's hungry kids when we're at the park. I love your terrible jokes and how you cry during commercials. I love watching you become more confident every day, believing in yourself the way I've believed in you from the start." Fear and hope. Rachel felt tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Derek said he loved me too at first. He promised we'd be a family. Then the second things got hard. The second being a father became real instead of abstract. He vanished." "How do I know you won't do the same?" "You don't," Benjamin said honestly. "I can't prove the future to you. But I can tell you this. I've spent 3 months showing up. I'll spend the next 3 and the next 3 after that doing the same. I'll keep showing up until you believe that I'm not going anywhere." Oliver stirred in his sleep, making the little snuffling sound he always made before waking. Benjamin instinctively began the gentle bouncing motion that always soothed him. "You already know how to calm him," Rachel observed. "You know he likes his bottle warmed for exactly 30 seconds. You know he only sleeps with his giraffe tucked under his left arm. You know all these tiny details about my son because you've been paying attention, because I love him," Benjamin said simply. "Because I want to be the dad he deserves. Not to replace anyone or compete with anyone, but to be the person who shows up and stays." The decision. Rachel looked at this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to prayers she hadn't known how to pray. She thought about the past 3 months. About every time he had helped without being asked, listened without judging, supported without controlling. She thought about Oliver's face lighting up whenever Benjamin appeared. She thought about how empty Sunday evenings felt after he left. "I've been falling in love with you too," she confessed. "I tried not to. I told myself it was just gratitude or loneliness or desperation for stability. But it's not. It's real. You're the first person I think about when something good happens, because I want to share it with you. You're who I want beside me when things are hard, because you make everything feel manageable." Benjamin shifted Oliver to one arm and reached for Rachel's hand with the other. "So what do we do now?" "We try," Rachel said, squeezing his hand. "We take it slow. We figure it out together, and we see if this crazy, unexpected thing between us can become something lasting." "I can work with that," Benjamin smiled. "Though I should warn you, when I commit to something, I commit completely. I'm not a halfway person. Good, Rachel said, because Oliver and I don't do halfway either. We're all in, or we're out. Then I'm all in, Benjamin declared. He leaned forward and kissed her forehead gently. A promise and a beginning. I'm all in with both of you. Oliver woke up then, rubbing his eyes and looking confused about why the two adults were crying and smiling simultaneously. He patted both their faces with his hands, his way of making sure they were okay. We're good, buddy, Benjamin assured him. We're really good. Building something real. The weeks that followed were a period of careful exploration and growing commitment. Benjamin and Rachel decided to keep things slow for Oliver's sake, but the shift in their relationship was undeniable. Goodbyes at the door now included gentle kisses. Text messages became more frequent and more personal. They talked about their hopes for the future, their fears, their dreams. Benjamin gradually shared more about his life and work. He took Rachel to the foundation's office, where she met the staff who had heard so much about her and Oliver. They introduced her as someone special, and Rachel felt herself blushing under their knowing smiles. Claire Anderson noticed the change immediately. You're glowing, she observed one afternoon, while Rachel was tidying up after the boys. Something happened. Rachel couldn't help but smile. Benjamin and I are seeing where things go. About time, Claire laughed. James and I have been taking bets on when you two would figure out you were in love. I said before Christmas. I win. The Andersons became part of their extended support network. They insisted Benjamin join them for their holiday party, where they treated him like family. Tyler and Jackson appointed themselves Oliver's big brothers, and Rachel felt surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her happiness. The promise of tomorrow on Christmas Eve. Benjamin arrived at Rachel's apartment with gifts, board books for Oliver, a beautiful cashmere scarf for Rachel, and a framed photo he had secretly taken weeks earlier. It showed Rachel and Oliver in the park, both laughing, surrounded by autumn leaves. The joy captured in that image took Rachel's breath away. This is how I see you, Benjamin explained. Strong, beautiful, full of life. I wanted you to see what I see. Rachel had gifts too, a handmade photo album documenting Oliver's first year, with many images including Benjamin. The final page had a note in her careful handwriting. Thank you for helping us find home. They spent a quiet evening together, watching Oliver play with wrapping paper more enthusiastically than his actual toys, eating takeout Chinese food, and talking about where life might take them. I want you to know something, Benjamin said as the evening wound down. I'm patient. We can take as much time as you need before making any big decisions. But I want you to know my intentions. I want to be Oliver's dad if you'll let me. I want to marry you someday, when you're ready. I want us to be a real family. Rachel's eyes filled with tears again. I want that too. Maybe not tomorrow or next week, but someday. I want Oliver to grow up knowing he's loved by someone who chose to stay. I want to build a life with you. Then that's what we'll do, Benjamin promised, pulling her close. One day at a time, together. As Rachel watched Benjamin read a bedtime story to Oliver that night, both of them cuddled on the small couch in her living room. She marveled at how life could change in an instant. One flight, one act of kindness, one stranger's shoulder to sleep, and her entire world had transformed. Oliver fell asleep to the sound of Benjamin's voice, secure in arms that would never let him fall. And Rachel fell asleep that night with hope replacing the fear that had governed her. Life for so long, the journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, conversations to have, adjustments to make. But for the first time since Derek had left, Rachel believed in happy endings. Not the fairy tale kind where everything was perfect, but the real kind where imperfect people loved each other through the hard parts and built something stronger because of what they had survived. Epilogue. Small church in Cambridge was decorated with white roses and soft candlelight. Rachel stood at the altar in a simple white dress, holding a bouquet of peonies. Beside her, Benjamin looked at her like she held the entire universe in her smile. In the front row, Mrs. Patterson dabbed her eyes. Mr. Rossi beamed proudly. The Andersons sat with their boys, who were serving as Oliver's honorary bodyguards for the day. And Oliver, now almost 3 years old, stood between his parents in his tiny suit. Holding the rings on a special pillow, "Dada, Mary Mama," he announced to the gathered guests. Because at 3, subtlety was not his strong suit. Everyone laughed. Yes, buddy, Benjamin said, kneeling down to Oliver's level. Dada is marrying Mama, is that okay with you? Yes, Oliver shouted, throwing his arms around Benjamin's neck as they exchanged vows. Rachel thought about that exhausted woman on a plane who had fallen asleep on a stranger's shoulder. She thought about how close she had come to missing this, how one different seat assignment could have meant a completely different life. Thank you, she whispered to Benjamin as they were pronounced husband and wife. For what? He whispered back, for being the stranger who became home. Benjamin kissed her softly, then scooped up Oliver to include him in their embrace. We were never strangers, he said. We were just family waiting to find each other.